Welcome to Comics with Dan. I have with me the creators of the mystery graphic novel Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Case of the Missing Men. The Case of the Missing Men is the first story in the Hobtown Mystery Stories series and was recently published in full color for the first time by Oni Press. After having been previously published by Conundrum Press in black and white, along with The Cursed Hermit, the second series, the second book of the series. So, Kris, Alex, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, my understanding on the collaborative effort between the two of you for this book is that it was Alex's brainchild that started it, and then Kris, you kind of came in and helped round out the circle and bring it to a final product. Can you walk me through sort of where that started and what changed from Alex, your first draft, to the final version that we got to see?
Well, it wouldn't have been even a first draft or anything. It was a very embryonic, kind of very loose idea. Kris and I were living together, and he was writing a lot in terms of like short stories and stuff. And I always loved his writing, and I was going to him a lot for advice as to how to write a story like this. It's so much easier to teach somebody to draw than it is to write. I think it's writing's something else. So at one point, Kris, I don't know if you got tired of like my questions and just started writing it, and it was like exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean we're old now. I have two kids myself. He's married, but back then we were 20 something, just like literally laying. He's laying on the floor, I'm laying on the couch, and we're looking at the ceiling, talking about our dream story. Right. And there's this he has this idea that he is stuck on and he can't let go of, and he's asking me stuff like, well, I have all these ideas, but I don't know what the mystery is. And I'm like, well, you just decide what it is. And he's like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, well, I don't know. What are you interested in? And he's like, I don't know, a lot of stuff. And I was like, just decide what it is, and that's the end, and then work backwards so that all the things that are interrelated point to that. And he's like, yeah, but what is the mystery? I'm like, I don't know.
It's like, yeah, but what is it though?
But he asked me to help him develop characters, and so that was the first thing I did. I still have the email where I was like, I like this idea, this idea, this idea, and we expanded sort of those existing characters. And the one that I added was Sam Finch, because he sort of had this tight-knit group, and I was like, if you have somebody who comes from outside, that can sort of give us, it's the fish out of water thing, but also let us have another one of those pulp characters that we love. So he's kind of like Tom Swift or Johnny Quest. He's one of those boy adventurers who, what we try to do is imagine, like, well, what would it be like if that guy was real? And so if you were a boy adventurer, you might be. Am I allowed to curse? Is this a cursing podcast?
Probably.
Won't curse.
You can if you want. I might have to. I don't know if I'll beep it out later or not.
Anyways, if you're a boy adventurer, you might be a pretty messed up person emotionally, socially. If you've never been around kids, if you've never been into a high school. So that was one of the big things I added to the cast. I don't know if you have anything else to say, AJ.
It was kind of we were each like interested in these different things. I was in art school, and Kris at the time was really obsessed with kind of like local folklore, and like actually in that filing cabinet we have like a whole collection of like self-published. It's Kris's amazing collection of self-published Nova Scotian like folklore books and stuff. And yeah, we just kind of worked in all these different themes that we were interested in at the time, and luckily we still are interested in them. So
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think one of the interesting things is that the weirdness and magic Alex had imagined, when we started talking about it, I was like, this is in our folklore. This already exists. Like these things are reported as supernatural phenomena. They're in the mythology of all the peoples that have been here in Nova Scotia, and it's just so cool to think that when Alex's imagination is going, it's traversing like the same landscape, like mental landscape that's existed for, I don't know, 400 years, but 10,000 years. You know, it's
right,
amazing.
right. No, yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Sam being like Johnny Quest, because I couldn't quite pinpoint who he reminded me of, but I think that's spot on, exactly who he is, and I don't know of any Johnny Quest stories that get into that side of him where he would be a little bit messed up. If you think about the lack of normalcy and everything like that. So I think that's a pretty spot on comparison there. And also, Chris, something you said, and maybe this is a little bit of a leap ahead to where I was planning on going with this, but you mentioned the advice you gave Alex being to start with the mystery, and then that's your solution, and then you work backwards, right? So, volume three of Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer, you've said that story is told in reverse chronological order. It is that sort of approach that you took, or the advice you gave to Alex? Is that what inspired doing volume three that way, The Secret of the Saucer, doing it that way, or is it unrelated, or what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I wanted to, whenever we're trying our hardest to make something that we love and that challenges ourselves. Whenever I'm writing it, I'm trying to give stuff to Alex that I'm like, he will like drawing this, and other times I'm like, he won't like this, but it'll be worth it. And making a mystery story in reverse chronological order was hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of work. It was difficult to write and figure out. Just logistically, it gets really weird when the ending is the beginning and the beginning is the ending. And then add into that, you have somebody who can see into the future, but she's
Right,
seeing into the
right,
future the wrong way,
right.
which is a bit mind-boggling, but it will all make sense, I think. I think the idea behind that story is that we want people to read it twice, and I think you will have to. Kind of like, and it's not an original idea to tell a story backwards. It's like Memento or what there's a lot of stories that do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in Hobtown we did it to reflect how the main character's feeling, Dana. And of course this book isn't out yet. It won't be out
Right.
until 2025. But the way that it feels when you're reading that, we want everyone to be like, wait, why does she look like, why is her hair like that? Why is that, why is that guy, why does that guy have a tin can on his head? And,
Right.
why aren't they all friends?
Right.
Why isn't he the leader? And why is that person the leader? And throwing that at you and then being like, all right, what happened before? And then we go through it and we get to a moment that's mind-blowing, and then we go, well, here's what happened before that and before that, and then we go all the way back to the first moment of the story where you just get the sense that something is off, something is going to go wrong, and luckily you now know what is going to go wrong, although they don't. And that's the majesty of storytelling is the audience gets to understand things that the characters don't.
Right. Right.
And one thing that's really neat about whenever I get to read these stories, it's rereading the script for the first time. It's like the funnest thing. I'm like laughing and crying in a room by myself. One really fun thing about this story too is that like the structure of it, even though it's told backwards, the structure is still like you're reading a story forward. So like the
Mm-hmm.
the kinds of like ups and downs that you would expect are happening, and like these kind of reveals are still happening in the order that you would expect in especially like a genre story like this. So it's like super impressive. Not to blow too much smoke up you there, Kris, but it is super impressive. Like that, the story's going this way. It's backwards, but yet it's still structurally and aesthetically it fits the mold of one of these kinds of stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to make a 5 act structure backwards.
Then forward, yeah.
Right. Right. And it's funny because I think that inadvertently comic readers sometimes experience that all the time, not intentionally, but rather, you pick up an issue of something you haven't read before and you're like, well, you know, why doesn't Batman have his hand? Why is that guy not this guy anymore? Like things like that. And then you have to go back, but this way is intentional and directional and fits into a story in that way intentionally, is what it sounds like. So I think that sounds like a really cool idea. And Kris, I think that some of the storytelling techniques you used in this first volume play into that well. One that I highlighted in my review of the book was that when there's a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, and I want to keep this fairly spoiler free so that people can enjoy the book for themselves. But rather than addressing the cliffhanger immediately after the chapter in the next chapter, you jump right to the end result of what happened and then work your way back through. Particularly, just some context when they were at the school, if that helps. um, but I think that sounds like it plays into your volume 3 here really well. So I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, that chapter is whenever I'm reading a story and I know what's going to happen, uh, I that's kind of when I check out.
Hmm.
So for me, I was like, it's more interesting if we go, okay, all this stuff happened, but what did it look like to other
Hmm.
people?
Right. Yeah.
What did it
Exactly.
what did it look like to the kids that are in the school as the climax is happening? What does it look like to the valedictorian putting up streamers for a dance at the gym?
Hmm.
And what is their interpretation of what's going on? Because again, the audience, the reader, we know what's happening, but we get to see all this. We get to see all of it through the skewed lens of the townspeople,
Hmm.
and then we can go back to the story and we can deliver on a big climax and have a big siege and whatever, and we get to pay off for the audience. But and I know that's not for everyone. I've seen reviews where people are like, why did they do that? It's like, well, because we did. We like that idea. We think it's fun and funny,
Hmm.
and best of all, I gave some great stuff to Alex to draw.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like even aside from like it's any chance I think that we can get to visit some of the characters in Hobtown, like all those kids. We take all those chances, so you get to, because the town itself and the town's people are such a big character in the story. Um, and yeah, that's a whole opportunity where you get to meet all these other kids, some of which become like main characters
Mm.
later on.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So.
and I think when you were choosing those characters, Kris, you were just looking at that one panel of all the kids at the assembly and being like, "I'll
Mm.
have that kid, I'll have that kid, and I'll have that kid," and then yeah, next thing you know, those characters are like main characters later on.
Yeah, no, that's the magic panel. That's there are so many important people that are there who I got to meet, and then uh, Alex didn't know them, I didn't know them, but there they were, and I got to look at the little heads and be like, that is a hell of a head.
There you go. Yeah. And so the thing about the mystery comics is that you can look at that a page of a giant number of characters like that and be like, it could be any number of these people. One of these people you could never see him again, or another person, it could, every character that gets introduced, you're just Is it them? Is it them?
Yeah.
Again, not to spoil anything,
Yeah.
but did you have it? Did you guess right? Were you guessing about which character it was the murderer?
No, no, I didn't.
No.
I did not. Um,
Yeah.
but so, Kris, you've mentioned a few times giving Alex fun things to draw, giving him things to draw that he doesn't like. Alex, it sounds like there's specific things that Kris gives you to draw that you're just like rolling your eyes. Is there anything specific that he gives you? You're just like, come on, man, like cut this out.
Um, Generally not. It's funny. Well, it's if it's anything, it's just like you know, when it's like a lot of information,
Mm,
when it's just like, you get like, because Kris has, he draws and he has a very visual brain, so I know Kris is seeing all these things, and it's like the only time I would ever feel anything like that would be when it's like, it's not even that I don't like it, it's just the challenge. The most challenged that I am is when there's just like a ton of blocking, like you have
mm,
all these characters in a scene and they have to do all this stuff in this very specific space where there's these objects and stuff that they're interacting with, that it all makes sense. And I get really like OCD and obsessive about it to make sure that, like, there's a north, east, west, and south in this place, and I know exactly where everything is.
mm,
But aside from that, I enjoy everything. There's some stuff, I think a lot of artists, when there's a scene, when there's a lot of like talking, a lot of artists, like pages and pages of dialogue, and sometimes you go, oh geez, that's going to be boring. And I think that sometimes, and then I get to those scenes and they're my favorite things to draw. I really love drawing, like the acting of the characters ends
mm.
up being some of my favorite stuff, because you can be so much looser and expressive with it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, Alex, there's several pages in the book that are somewhat splash pages, I'll call them. But instead of taking up a full page, they're confined to one panel in the center. Can you take me through the thought process for designing these pages this way? Um, just as sort of a note, I feel like I'm looking at like a photograph of the town when I see it, and I think that's a really cool feeling because you get, you could have in a like a superhero book, you'll get a giant splash page of a city, but for Hobtown, it's like it looks almost like you're looking at like a Polaroid. So was there anything intentional about that, or design wise that you want to kind of elaborate on a bit?
Um, one guy that that is a big deal to me is Chester Brown.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know who that is. He's like
The name's familiar, yeah.
he's
I got him right here.
yeah, there he is.
Here he is.
And he has a book called "I Never Liked You,"
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
um,
I've heard of that. Yeah.
and that book was a really big deal to me. And he does a lot of that, like a lot of kind of creative um, positioning of panels, and,
Hmm.
and doing that, like having panels like that just kind of sit in the middle of the page.
Hmm.
And I just really loved the effect that it had. So I guess I'm admitting to stealing that from him, I guess. But it's just
Inspiring.
I feel like having a splash that takes up a whole page, and then just having an image that's framed within the page. They do different things,
Hmm.
and I guess I always felt like when I would see something like that, that it's a lot of it's about timing to me.
Hmm.
And I feel like when you open a page like that, it kind of causes you to pause on it in a different way. I don't know if that's true. It just kind of is for me. Um, and also, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's also less lines that I have to draw if it's a small rather than a big splash page.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes it's just not necessary, and you can kind of crop a scene into just like something that you just want to show.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'll say too, like conceptually, one of the things we talked about a long, long time ago is the actual ink drawings, like the illustrations that are in Nancy Drew,
Mm.
that are in a lot of those old Strathmeyer Syndicate books. Because like you look at the cover of that and you're like, this looks awesome. I want to read this, and then you open it up and it's like, well, it's kind of a little bit lame. You always want more from it. Obviously, it's not Hobtown. It's not insane. But those illustrations, like especially the older ones, are like really, really artful. And the line work is sometimes reminiscent of what Alex does, or Alex evokes that. And so part of that too is like the palette cleanser of like a little illustration in a kid's chapter book. That's like, here's a little, here's a little building and or here's the, the thatch roof cottage
Right.
on the lake. You can evoke that same thing, and it I mean, I can't answer for Alex, but it's like it's often the majesty of nature. It's often something that puts you in the place and makes you feel at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of it as a palate cleanser is great, because it's, something real intense just happened the page before, and you're in the page and it's this nice, scene of the water with, some houses nearby, and it's just so peaceful, and it's just like, I know this isn't going to stay like this for long, like something else crazy is going to happen.
Yeah.
So
It's something that you see a lot in manga. You see a
mm,
lot of like setting a scene and giving the reader a second, and yeah, it's not something you see as much in American comics, but
mm,
it's something that I always really loved, and a big thing for, like, it's something that you see in films and stuff like that. I think our style is pretty cinematic in a
mm,
lot of ways. I always loved a big deal, a big influence on the story is something like Twin Peaks, where they did that a lot. Just like a lot of scenery. Like, this is where you are. You know what
mm,
I mean? That's important. It's
yeah.
important to be like, this is the town. And it's its own thing. Uh, yeah, it's more work to do that, but it's totally worth it.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And like you said, the a splash page versus that, it's similar in the sense that you turn the page and you feel an emotion, right? Normally with a splash page, it's surprise or awe or whatever, but this is, I think, a little more calming and sets you in a spot where you're supposed to be, like you were saying. Especially, it is important with something like Hobtown, where you are. I mean, the setting is the story. I mean, it's so key to the story that it's in the name. So, so um, that's a kind of a good segue though into where you were talking about more or less lines to draw. But Alex, I love the use of the hatching and cross hatching that you use in your art style, which is a ton of lines. um, is there a particular artist that you credit? Is it Chester Brown, or that you credit as inspiration for that part of your style, or did you just kind of naturally come about using that sort of technique?
Um, yeah, I think more in the way that, like, I actually cartoon the characters out is, I would look to uh, Chester for that.
Mm,
Um, Originally, we were going to do this story in color, and it was just insane. I started to try to do it by hand in color. I wasn't, and still not super proficient with color.
mm,
So about, like, I think I got, how many did I get? Like 20 pages in, Chris? Not even.
Yeah.
And we were just like, I'm not doing this. And then we did think about the old Stratmeyer books, those old black and white illustrations, and those old pulp books. And we're like, it's kind of appropriate to do black and white anyway. And from that moment, I was really thinking about, well, I'm not using color. What do I have in place of that? I have texture is sort of the main replacer that I use for
mm,
instead of color. So when I thought about how to evoke whatever sort of feeling, I was thinking about how can I use black and white to make a texture.
mm,
And for whatever reason, I think in order to stick to the form of the illustrations in those old books, it was like, I'm not even going to really use gray.
mm,
So a lot of the cross hatching is really just to do gray. I actually did way too much cross hatching. There's a lot of background cross hatching that I did that our old editor at Conundrum actually was like, you should get rid of that. It's this bit, and I'm like, you're right. It's just busying up the page. But yeah, and with all that, having these new editions come out in color is just really great because like, we always wanted it to be in color. And
Mm.
now on top of all that, there is color to add a whole new layer to it. And, you know, yeah, it's been really great.
Mm. So,
Oh, and sorry, you're asking what artists though. I would say artists that I do look at that, whether I knew it at the time that I was going after, like somebody like Shigeru Mizuki is really like he does those really rich. Every once in a while, you just see like these super super rich backgrounds. I guess like it's funny. I don't read that much manga. There's a few artists that I read, but they're like a lot of the manga style was also pretty influential in terms of doing that kind of work because they generally were and are always black and white.
hmm, right, right, that makes sense. Oh. So, Kris, how were you able to pull off one of the most amazing feats in all of writing, and that is writing teenage characters without sounding like it's a Disney Channel original movie?
uh, well, that's quite the compliment. So thank you. Well, I don't know. I think when I think about the story, I think about realism as a force,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not realistic. It's
Mm-hmm.
realism, and
Right.
so realism is something you can use periodically to uh, to it's a spice that you put in because none of this is realistic, but there are realist elements to the story, and so I think things like even if you have a character like Dana who's super well spoken, like perfect, perfect child, right? Straight A student. Um, if you get to see her interact with people around her who are not like that, who are, you know, and by the way, when I say ignorant hicks, are people going to see the picture of us where we are ourselves, our hicks, grew up in the middle of nowhere. But if you put Dana Nance around ignorant hicks, the way she looks and reacts to them, or even the way her father speaks to her, I think all those things help ground those characters. Talking to themselves.
Yeah, it's the clock again. Yeah. Sorry about that. There's not a good way for
um,
me to mute it.
but I feel like um, their interactions with the world around them helps ground them a lot.
Mm,
And with Dana, a great one is her father, but also her friendship with someone like Pauline, who is from the trailer park, who is not the most well spoken or articulate person, but these are her best friends, and she has to deal with it. So even someone like her, who operates on this higher level, I think we can make her feel like a real person, um, even just making it feel emotionally true, right? Her frustrations with the people around her, with how blasé they are about these things, or their lack of follow through or commitment to the program, or whatever it is.
mm.
But
Yeah,
thank you for the compliment. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, and it's
I,
just. Oh, God.
I was just gonna add that like, um, you know, Chris and I have like a shared childhood too, and we're kind of
Mm,
like, I think, we went to high school together, and I think that's a big part of it too. That we're kind of both of us kind of drawing from that shared memory of the way kids are, and I think
mm,
what Chris also does really well is that yeah, like you're saying about Pauline, like kids. I think what you mean is like you have adults writing kids, and
mm.
they don't sound like kids.
Right. Nobody talks like that.
Somebody like Dana, who's yeah, so somebody like Dana is like very educated, but like kids they don't talk good. Like they're not bad at it. So like a lot of the kids talk like idiots because they're
Yeah.
kids.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it just
Yeah.
it felt very organic, and you know, no forced lingo or anything like that. So that was nice to read, because it's always a concern with teenage characters that you're gonna get this just awkward "how do you do, fellow kids" dialogue. So I was really glad that that wasn't the case here. So that was well done.
Well, and the job too, give each character their own voice too, right?
Yeah.
Like Denny, if Denny's doesn't sound like Brennan. They're brothers. They do not sound like each other whatsoever. Dana doesn't sound like Pauline, and even Sam, who is more similar to Dana, still talks in kind of an older, like a more archaic. Like he talks just like dad. You know, his dad is like a guy who would say, who would say gumption, and so Sam would say gumption as well, or everything is very very technical for him. His language is like related to the motor engine and the airplane. It's yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, growing up I grew up in a smaller town myself, not in Canada, but in the U.S. And I thought that, and I live in a small town now. Hobtown really captured that small town feeling. And it's funny because even you mentioned Hicks, but I feel that you were able to capture, the both of you were able to capture Hobtown as a small town, but not just a bunch of redneck Hicks that are uneducated. So, what was it that was enabled you to capture that small town with a charming, cozy feel, and not some of the stereotypes that people get of small towns?
I mean, I think despite me denigrating small towns, I'm from a small town. There's beautiful things in a small town. There is a sense of community. There's a pride about where you are. Often the landscapes are quite moving. Where we're from is just lush green forest, deep rivers. It's beautiful. But at the same time, there is secrets and violence and ignorance and poverty, and you can't speak about one without the other. Um, and in a lot of ways, Hoptown is about small towns. It's a cursed town, but every small town is a cursed town, right? Especially if you're special, like if you're a person who reads, if you're someone who's interested in the arts, if you're gay or a little bit different anyway, or anything, it's really difficult to survive in a place like that. And so I think for Hobtown, like the metaphor underneath a lot of it really is like, um, how are you going to survive uh, who you are going to be? Because all around you are grown-ups, but those grown-ups were kids just like you not that long ago, and here they are stuck in this place, and they have confronted whatever it is, or they've denied it, or accepted it, or whatever it is, helped bury the truth. You are going to engage with the horrors of the past just like everyone else. And you think you're special doing it, but you're not. Everyone did and does and will. And that's the thing we're chasing after with Hoptown through monsters and goofy, mysteries and all kinds of silly, weird stuff. But that's that's what I keep in mind is what's underneath the town
Mm-hmm.
is the town.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and like in a small town, you are more likely to um, have generations and generations of like families that are there and kind of stuck there, and they stay
Mm-hmm.
there. So it's easier in a small town to kind of trace that back and get that and get a sense of that history than I think it is in a city generally, unless you're kind of in like a tight little community in a city. And there's different kinds of small towns too, right? Like I feel like the town that me and Kris are from is quite different from Hoptown in a lot of ways. There's some similarities that the funniness and like you said, like the beauty and stuff like that. But like Hobtown, one thing about it too is it's one of these kinds of towns, especially like a seaside town like that, where you have like a real mix of class. that interacts in I feel like kind of a special way in a small town than they might in the city, because they're kind of, it's, you know, it's a small area. They're kind of all mixed in together in a way that you might not get in a city. Yeah, so yeah, like I said, it's so much easier to kind of trace a history in a small town when you're like, we have these families that have known each other forever, and everybody does know each other. That's a big thing too. You know, in a city, everybody's anonymous, whereas in a small town, you're more likely to maybe not know everybody, but you're like 1 degree
Right.
separation from pretty much everybody in the town. Yeah.
Yeah. The politics of small towns always amazed me because, you know, people think, you know, big cities have, you know, high profile mayors and whatever and city council and all that stuff, but the politics in small towns are insane. They just like the amount of drama that goes into some of that sometimes. And I don't know if it's the same way, you know, up where you guys are from, but um, in in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, it's just there's all these little tiny boroughs and towns, and everyone has their own council and everything, and it's just there's so much drama over everything. So yeah, so
Well, you gotta in a city. I think it's easier for like the mayor to be this guy, and he has this big golden key or whatever, and it's like this guy that's so much separate from you. Whereas in a small town, it's just the dude who lives above the convenience store. Or whatever.
right,
Like it's just, it's you know them. You know, like you
right,
see them, you know that he's an idiot just like you. You know what I mean? Like there's no, yeah, you can't. There's not as much of a steep hierarchy, I
right,
guess, as
right,
there is in a city.
right.
Another thing I wanted to say about small towns, and Kris mentioned this before with Sam. I think one way that we do this in the story, and showing how, when you're in a small town, even if you're not in a small town and you see a small town, it's such a regular thing, and it's really hard for people living in a small town to see it as anything extraordinary. Even a weird town like this, where there's actually like really strange stuff that goes on, everything becomes so normalized, and just like regular. And with Sam Finch coming in, as this guy who lives what they would consider an extraordinary life, where he's this kid who's like a globe-trotting adventurer with his dad. He comes into this town and he's like, this is the most insane place that I've ever been. He's like, you guys are crazy. And I think that is a feeling that is a feeling you get too as you get older and you reflect back on your youth in a small town. You're like, that wasn't actually wild. It was pretty crazy. Those people are really messed up.
Right. Right. The more places you go, you realize how jacked up where you're from really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. Um. So you know, life is full of mysteries, and you know, something that you used to own, but you don't know what happened to it from a long time ago. Someone took the last donut, but no one's going to admit it. What is the biggest unsolved mystery in your life?
Wow, what a great question. Do you want to go first, Alex?
You go first.
Oh boy. I don't think I have a good answer that's like a tangible
Mm.
answer. It's the boring kind of like you know, like the real mystery of day-to-day life is like, how do I get from here to death, having lived a good life, being able to look at myself in the mirror, know that I've done the right things, and that I'm not lying to myself, and that when I tell my children something, that this is the way things are. Is it in fact the way things are? Because I don't know. So I guess my mystery is existential, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty
Because
mysterious.
I very grown up answer. It's very boring. But I've seen some weird stuff in the sky. But that's the
There you
best
go.
I got. But the real keeps me up at night is like how how do I make my children into good people like I pretend to be.
Mm.
You know, that.
It's funny. I went through a similar thing where I was like, I mean, my life is full of missing things. I'm always losing. It's like that's that's not really a mystery. Um, I tried to think about actual specific things, like
Mm.
but I had this thing like one time uh, there's a area of water called the Northumberland Strait where we are between. It's kind of actually in between all three provinces in the Maritimes. It's between like the mainland and Prince Edward Island. And one time when I was a kid, it was glowing. That was really mysterious. But I learned not long ago that it was like phosphorus
Yeah.
stuff. So that's another mystery solved by just learning about stuff.
Right.
But my answer would be similar to Chris's. But more in the end of like it's very mysterious to me, and I kind of prefer it to be mysterious, like how people end up who they are.
Mm.
Like what goes into who you are, and how, like how people come to be in the place where they are. Like just there's just so much that goes into it, and it's utterly mysterious, and I think it's unsolvable.
Mm.
And I do think about it a lot. I think mostly in a way that like I'm very grateful for things like the place that me and Kris are from, where we grew up together, is not a place conducive to a couple of kids getting into the arts and actually doing it and getting published and doing all this stuff. Like it's all our circumstance of even doing these books is very unlikely for us, and it's like we're really lucky, and that's mysterious to me. It's like how did that happen? Look, yeah.
Right. So yeah, and just to
I know I'm supposed to ask you a question, but do you have any mysteries that you have been grappling with?
I do. So I'm one of four kids, so there's always mysteries on stuff from our childhood. Where did it go? Which sibling has it? Do any siblings have it, or is it just gone? Um, so there's that stuff like that. But to add on to yours, to both of yours, really is the the mystery of how do you balance it all? How do you balance a professional career, handling kids, being a good husband, all that stuff, right? Just that's a mystery of how am I going to, you know, give 100% effort to all of those things, and and kind of get through that. But
Yeah, it's a mystery to me that you guys do it. I don't have kids, and I don't know how I'm gonna be. I don't know how you guys do it.
it's I mean it's just I mean and kids is one of the many responsibilities. So I mean I'm sure you experience the same thing in a different way. Just that there's so much going on all the time. but yeah. So my understanding, you have a 5-book deal with Oni Press. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. So
So
the first two
okay.
have already been published. They've been published with Conundrum, our old publisher, in
Right.
black and white, and coming over to Oni, they're all going to be in color. So Case of the Missing Men just came out,
Mm-hmm.
and then The Cursed Hermit, or The Cursed Hermit, as some people like to say it. We are literally clicking through the final edits right now and looking at it. And it's really quite beautiful.
Nice.
And then after that, it's The Secret of the Saucer, which we talked a little bit about earlier. And then 2 more books, which the titles have been released already, so I'm at liberty to divulge them. It's A Journey into the Abyss, where the heroes literally go underneath Hobtown. Finally, The Return of the Miniman, which
Oh no.
we're not really saying anything about it.
That's the proper reaction. Oh no.
Oh no. Well, yeah. All right. I feel like I should reserve my comments for that because I don't want to say anything. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone watching. So So that sort of answers the question I had about are 4 and 5 also going to be Hobtown Mysteries. But are you hoping to, for book number 5, to draw Dana and the gang's story to a close, or leave it open for more, or do you have like sort of an ending in mind for them, or is it just let's just as long as you have stories to tell, keep it going?
Well, I mean, that's the contract we have. The
Right.
contract is 5 books. If at the end of it, anyone, is like, we want more,
Mm.
and they go to Oni Press, and they're like, "Where is it? Where's book 6?" Uh, and they have their torches and pitchforks out. Then we have an idea for that.
Mm.
That's very specific.
Right.
That we've been talking about forever.
Mm.
But otherwise, we are going to end with 5,
Mm.
as far as we know.
Mm.
If it's a big smash hit and everyone wants more, that's a different story.
Mm.
But we have a contract for 5, and we will fulfill that contract. And I'm writing 5 right now, actually. So
Okay.
3 and 4 are written, and that's the one that I'm toiling away at every single day.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I think in terms of this story, like, where the story comes in, there's story in Hobtown before, we bring our kids into it. And I think we imagine that the story goes on after them too. Like once they're done their part, like it's just, that's what the town is that there's this kind of there's always going to be a detective club. There's always going to be, it's always going to be a weird town. And I guess that in terms of the question of like bringing things to a close, I think what a lot of readers might like, with this kind of story where, I guess I can say we will answer a lot of the questions, if that's kind of what you're wondering. Like, we if especially like there might be some questions that you have to read very closely to get sort of an answer. But even those answers, I don't want to speak necessarily for Kris, but I don't think we're like interested in giving a super clear answer and closing things up real tight and clean.
Right.
There are certain things that I think are supposed to be up for interpretation. It's more fun. I know as a reader and watcher of things, I like for some things to be left up to me to interpret and to have my own answers for things, and we'll leave things up like that as well for people.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. Especially if it's the artistic choice to present it that way, right? And not just unaddressed. Oops, we forgot that we introduced that type of thing, which you see that happen in media all the time. But I'm waiting for the TV and movie rights to take my kids to the theater and see Hobtown Mystery Stories the movie. So
Us too.
yeah,
That'd be nice.
yeah. So I want to end on the most important question, I think. Which Scooby Doo episode is your favorite? Personally, I like the one with the creeper, that big kind of the guy in the intro. He's just the classic Scooby Doo villain.
Right.
So
Alex is going to be like, the one where it was just an old man and they take the mask off.
so
really, I didn't see that ending coming. I feel like I haven't watched them in a long time. I feel like they're all kind of jumbled up in my head. Do you watch them with your kids? Is that why? Yeah.
Yeah. So right now I read the Batman and Scooby Doo comic with my kids. We're both big. We're all big into that. It's really well done. But they're really into Scooby Doo. The nice thing about it is that boys, girls, everyone loves Scooby Doo. It's not if my boys want to watch Transformers, but my girls want to watch Barbie, the middle ground is Scooby Doo. So
that's
so
great.
yeah, they're enjoying Scooby Doo right now quite a bit.
I can't really speak to any specific episode, but I think Scooby Doo is special in the way that kind of like there's a lot of cartoons like this that I think. I don't know how old you are. You have 5 kids, so you're probably our age at least, right?
32.
Are you like 40 something?
32.
Sorry?
32.
32. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, well, so you're probably within range though. Like, if you're a Saturday morning cartoons era kid, the older it got, like the original Scooby Doo or like Spider Man, with that like slide in, slide out cell animation.
Yeah.
It just gave you this it's like suddenly you had a fever even though you didn't.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel dizzy and strange. And Scooby Doo, I think, was one of the ones that I would watch and just come away being like, I feel so. I feel so weird, and I can't explain why.
Right.
But I'm gonna go watch more.
I'm gonna chase this feeling.
It's not like the medium itself
Right.
is like so crunchy.
Right.
It's like it chews you up.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Scooby Doo is in what we're doing, mostly in that, like, what I always liked about Scooby Doo is that the gang are having a great time. Even when things get scary, they're very clearly like it's fun to them.
Yeah.
And I think especially with like Denny in our books, like Denny's having a good time. Like he's very aware that they are on an adventure. You know what I mean? And he's all about it.
Right.
So I love that aspect of it, that there's like a little bit of self-awareness with the characters, not too much to make it, annoying, but like they seem to know that they're like in a mystery story having a good time. They have like a van, they're it's like branded that they like the mystery mobile or whatever. Mystery Machine.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the only one I can remember is the one with the riverboat.
Okay.
And I always really like the backdrops there. I think the monster is just like a straight up ghost. I think it's just like a very regular ghost.
You mean a real estate developer in a mask?
Yeah.
I think there is like a relationship between Scooby Doo and our story though, which is like we don't have a freak of the week. It's like ours is a saga, and it's like they like to think that they have a freak of the week kind of, and the world was like that. Like they have their old cases that are kind of they're nothing, like the egg thief mystery and the case of the talking fire, and that they have that in their brains that they're like we're going through it, but then once our story actually begins, it's like no, you'll never be normal again.
Right. This is different. It's not some guy in a mask this time. No, and to be clear, I'm not likening the predictability of Scooby Doo to your book at all. So just in case that's what you thought was happening.
Yeah.
I mean
that's gonna be our big end. It's gonna be a man in a mask.
Right.
That's book 5.
It'll be a Great Dane. Great Dane behind it the whole time. So, okay, so that's all that I have. We're coming up on an hour here, so I really appreciate it, guys. This is a great conversation. I wish you the best of luck, and I'm really excited to read more Hobtown Mystery Stories. So, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Dana. Thanks for having us.
Yep. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll come back for the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to have you. So, all right. Thanks, guys.